guys, welcome to Set to a Squeaks, the one-stop destination for NTA NET exam. As we all know, clearing the NET exam is one of the biggest dream of millions who want to pursue a career in research as well as in teaching field. And with proper guidance and good materials, cracking NET exam is going to be an easy task. So guys, here we are with ample amount of videos on the important contents of English literature as well as a detailed analysis of previous year question paper, which is surely going to help you to crack the upcoming NET exam. So friends, please do subscribe, learn and succeed. So now let us move on to our very first video, the periodicals, magazines and journals. This is one of the most important topic in English literature that is frequently asked in the NET exam. And we have tried our best to incorporate all the important periodicals, magazines and journals. And guys, for your convenience, we have divided this content into 5 parts because too much information in one single video may look like information overload. So friends, we promise you that after watching these videos, you need not have to rely on any other materials in search of the same content. So guys, let us begin. First of all, let me introduce you what a periodical, magazine and a journal mean by. A periodical is any publication that comes out regularly or occasionally. The Sports Illustrated, the Journal of Anthropological Research, the World Almanac, the Wall Street Journal, the Phone Book are some of its examples. Then about the magazine, a magazine is a periodical aimed at the general public and it contains news, personal narratives and opinions. Its articles are often written by professional writers with or without expertise in the subject and it contains secondary discussion of events, usually with little documentation. For example, the footnotes or bibliography. Magazines use vocabulary understandable to most people and often have lot of eye-catching illustrations. The Time, Newsweek, US News and World Report and Psychology Today are a few examples of magazines. Coming to the journal, a journal or we can call it a scholarly journal is a scholarly periodical that aims at specialists, academics and researchers. Its articles are generally written by experts on the subject and uses more technical language. They contain original research, conclusions based on data, footnotes or endnotes, and more often it does not include an abstract and bibliography. Many but not all academic journals are peer-reviewed. The Journal of Physical Chemistry, the Chaucer Review, the Millbank Quarterly, and Labour History are a few examples of journals. The table given lists out the major differences between a journal and a magazine. Guys, take your own time and please go through it slowly because it is very important. Okay, now let us discuss the important periodicals, magazines and journals one by one in detail. Starting from the Tattler. The Tattler is a British literary and society journal begun by Richard Steele in 1709 and was published for 2 years. That is from 12 April 1709 to 2nd January 1711. It represented a new approach to journalism featuring cultivated essays on contemporary manners and established the pattern that would be copied in such British classics as Addison and Steele's Spectator, Samuel Johnson's Rambler and Idler and Goldsmith's Citizen of the World. It influenced essayists as late as Charles Lamb and William Hazlitt. Addison and Steele liquidated the Tattler in order to make a fresh start with a similar Spectator, and the collected issues of Tattler are usually published in the same volume as the collected Spectator. It was published thrice a week, that is on Tuesdays, Thursdays and on Saturdays. The aim of this journal was to expose the false art of life, to pull off the disguises of cunning, vanity of affection, and to recommend a general simplicity in our dress, our discourse and our behavior. Richard Steele used the name Isaac Bickerstaff Squire and on 13 January 1711, James Watson reprinted it replacing Bickerstaff with Donald Macstaff of the North. 3 months after the original Tattler was first published, an unknown woman writer using the pen name Mrs. Krakenthorpe published what was called the Female Tattler from 8th July 1709 to 31st March 1710. Its 18th century imitations include the London Tattler and Northern Tattler. It was Leigh Hunt who launched the Tattler, a daily journal of literature and the stage. In July 1901, Clement Shorter, the publisher of The Spear, introduced a magazine called Tattler and was in the print in the 21st century. Next one is the Female Tattler. This is one of the first periodicals written primarily for, though not aimed solely at, an audience of women. The Female Tattler charmed early 18th century Londoners with its lively wit and scathing satire. In circulation for less than 1 year, it nevertheless marks an important point in magazine publication history and in female authorship and readership. Purportedly written by women, first by a Mrs. Krakenthorpe and then taken over by a society of ladies, the Female Tattler is often passed over, especially in relation to its counterpart and inspiration, Richard Steele's periodical The Tattler. Yet, the Female Tattler capably stands on its own. Like all cultural texts, the Female Tattler is a product of both its time and place. Then comes the Spectator. It's a daily publication started by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele from 1711 to 1712 in England in 7 volumes. It was reviewed in 1718 without Steele and was published thrice weekly for 6 months. The aim of the Spectator is to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality. Next one is the Freeholder. It's a newspaper started by Addison in 1715 to express his political views. It was entered in 1716. Then comes the Gentleman's Magazine. It was founded by Edward Cave in January 1731. It ran for 200 years, that is from 1731 to 1922. It was the first to use the term magazine from the French word magazine meaning storehouse. Samuel Johnson's first regular employment as a writer was with the Gentleman's Magazine. Its original title is The Gentleman's Magazine or Trader's Monthly Intelligencer. Cave edited it under the pen name Sylvanus Urban. It ceased its general publication in September 1907 and its issues of 4 pages were printed between 1907 and 1922. Next one is the Scots Magazine. It published articles on subjects of Scottish interest. It is the oldest magazine in the world and is still in publication. Its first issue was on 9th February 1739. The Scots Magazine had a rivalry to the London-based Gentleman's Magazine and in 1801 Archibald Constable bought the magazine and 3 years later amalgamated it with the Edinburgh Magazine and Literary Miscellany. Next one is the Rambler. It's a periodical which consists of series of short papers written by Samuel Johnson. It consists of 2 not 8 articles. It was published on Tuesdays and Saturdays from 1750 to 1752. It discussed themes like morality, literature, society, politics, and religion. Johnson included quotes and ideas in his publication from Renaissance humanists such as Desiderius Erasmus and René Descartes. In 1901, Herbert Vivian produced a magazine called The Rambler that he intended as a revival of Johnson's periodical, but lasted until 1902. Then comes The World. The World is a weekly newspaper started in 1753 and entered in 1756. Its contributors are Edward Moore, Horace Walpole, E.S. Dallas, and Charles Hanbury Williams. Next one is The Citizen of the World. The Citizen of the World is a collection of letters written by Oliver Goldsmith from the perspective of the fictional Lin Chi Altanqi, a Chinese philosopher living in London. The letters were originally published separately in series from January 1760 to August 1761 in the daily journal The Public Ledger. Goldsmith uses Altanqi's foreign persona as a way of satirizing the manners and customs of mid-18th century London. During this period, Britain's perception of China was conflicted and ambivalent. On the one hand, China and Eastern culture were othered as strange, exotic, inferior, and threatening. But on the other hand, knowledge of Confucianism and the rational and cultivated culture of China had reached the West and drew interest from Enlightenment thinkers. In the letters, Goldsmith presents Altanqi, a declared Confucian, as an authoritative, credible narrator and emphasizes China as a tutored nation. Furthermore, Altanqi's nationality and his experiences of being personally collected by the London elite allowed Goldsmith to criticize the commercial craze for chinoiserie, the irony of which probably wasn't lost on Goldsmith. Next one is The Observer. It's a British newspaper published on Sundays. The Guardian Media Group Limited acquired it in 1993. It had social, liberal and democratic stances. It was first published in 1791 and it is the world's oldest Sunday newspaper. Observer magazine had free monthly magazines like Observer Sport Monthly, Observer Music Monthly, Observer Woman and Observer Food Monthly. It followed its daily partner The Guardian and converted to Berliner format on Sunday 8th January 2006. The Observer was awarded the National Newspaper of the Year at the British Press Awards 2007. Next one is the Edinburgh Review. The best known, long-lasting and most influential of the four was the third, which was published regularly from 1802 to 1929. The first Edinburgh Review was a short-lived venture initiated in 1755 by the Select Society, a group of Scottish men of letters concerned with the Enlightenment goals of social and intellectual improvement. According to the preface of the inaugural issue, the journal's purpose was to demonstrate the progressive state of learning in this country and thereby to incite Scots to a more eager pursuit of learning, to distinguish themselves and to do honour to their country. The Third Edinburgh Review became one of the most influential British magazines of the 19th century. It promoted Romanticism and Whig politics. It was started on 10th October 1802 by Francis Jeffrey, Sidney Smith, Henry Brougham and Francis Horner. And it was published by Archibald Constable in quarterly issues until 1929. It began as a literary and political review. Under its first permanent editor, Francis Jeffrey, it was a strong supporter of the Whig Party and liberal politics and regularly called for political reform. Its main rival was the Quarterly Review, which supported the Tories. The magazine was also noted for its attacks on the Lake poets, particularly William Wordsworth. The magazine ceased publication in 1929. The Scottish cultural magazine New Edinburgh Review was founded in 1969. In 1984, it explicitly adopted the title Edinburgh Review along with the motto to gather all the rays of culture into one. It is still published and is a part of the Eurozine network. Next one is the Monthly Repository. It's a British monthly Unitarian periodical which ran between 1806 and 1838. In terms of editorial policy on theology, the repository was largely concerned with rational dissent. Considered as a political journal, it was radical, supporting a platform of abolition of monopolies, abolition of slavery, repeal of taxes on knowledge, extension of suffrage, national education, reform of the Church of England, and changes to the poor laws. It was established when Robert S. Plant bought William Whittler's Universal Theological Magazine and changed the name to the Monthly Repository of Theology and General Literature. S. Plant edited the magazine until the end of 1826 when the paper was bought by the recently formed British and Foreign Unitarian Association. The Cookites, the Methodist Unitarian movement founded by Joseph Cook, was launched by an article in the Monthly Repository in May 1815. A second series of the magazine, now the Monthly Repository and Review of General Literature, was begun in January 1827. The Unitarian Association's book department under Thomas Rees took direct editorial control until William Johnson Fox was appointed as its editor in 1828. In 1831, Fox cut the magazine's explicit ties with Unitarianism by buying the paper, which had been making a loss from the association. He continued as its editor and as its proprietor until 1836, when the magazine was briefly owned and edited by first Richard Henry Horne and then by Leigh Hunt. Its contributors are John Bowring, Lance Carpenter, George Dyer, Benjamin Flower, William Friend, Jeremiah Joyce, John Kentish, Harriet Martineau, J.S. Mill, Joseph Nightingale, John Towell Rhett, Emily Taylor, Eliza Flower and Sarah Fuller Flower Adams. Next one is the Examiner. It's a weekly paper started by Leigh and John Hunt from 1808 to 1886. The subtitle of the Examiner is A Sunday Paper on Politics, Domestic Economy and Theatricals. Its contributors are Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, John Keats and William Hazlitt. The motto of the Examiner is Truth for its sole object. Albany Fawn Blake became its editor from 1830 to 1847. Next one is the Quarterly Review. It's a literary and political periodical founded in March 1809 by the well-known London publishing house John Murray. It ceased publication in 1967. Typical of early 19th century journals, reviewing in the Quarterly was highly politicized and on occasion excessively dismissive. Writers and publishers known for their Unitarian or radical views were among the early journal's main targets. Prominent victims of scathing reviews included the Irish novelist Lady Morgan, the English poet and essayist Walter Savage Landor, the English novelist Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, and her husband, the poet P.B. Shelley. In an 1817 article, John Wilson Crocker attacked John Keats in a review of Endymion for his association with Leigh Hunt and the so-called Cockney School of Poetry. Shelley blamed Crocker's article for bringing about the death of the seriously ill poet snuffed out in Byron's ironic phrase by an article. In 1816, Sir Walter Scott reviewed his own but anonymously published Tales of My Landlord, partly to deflect suspicion that he was the author. He proved one of the book's harshest critics. Scott was also the author of a favourable review of Jane Austen's Emma. Initially, the quarterly was set up primarily to counter the influence on public opinion of the Edinburgh Review. Its first editor, William Gifford, was appointed by George Canning, at the time Foreign Secretary, later Prime Minister. Early contributors included the Secretaries of the Admiralty John Wilson Crocker and Sir John Barrow, the Poet Laureate Robert Southey, the poet novelist Sir Walter Scott, the Italian exile Ugo Foscolo, the Gothic novelist Charles Robert Maturin, and the essayist Charles Lamb. Under Gifford, the journal took the Canningite liberal conservative position on matters of domestic and foreign policy, if only inconsistently. It opposed major political reforms, but it supported the gradual abolition of slavery, moderate law reform, humanitarian treatment of criminals and the insane, and the liberalizing of trade. In a series of brilliant articles in its pages, Southey advocated a progressive philosophy of social reform. Because two of his key writers, Scott and Southey, were opposed to Catholic emancipation, Gifford did not permit the journal to take a clear position on that issue. Next one is the Reflector. It's a London-based quarterly magazine printed and published by John Hunt. It is the second of several periodicals edited by Leigh Hunt. It dealt with themes like philosophy, politics, and the liberal arts. Leigh Hunt was the primary contributor, but he was assisted by others, most notably by Charles Lamb, who wrote 14 essays and poems. It was not a financial success and ceased publication after these 4 issues. Then comes the Blackwood's magazine. It's a British magazine and miscellany printed between 1817 and 1980 by publisher William Blackwood. It is originally called as the Edinburgh Monthly Magazine, and shortly we can call it as MAGA. The title page of the Blackwood's magazine contains the image of George Buchanan, who is a 16th century Scottish historian, religious and political thinker. It had a rivalry to the Whig supporting Edinburgh Review. John Wilson wrote under the pseudonym of Christopher North in this Blackwood's magazine. It published the works of radicals of British Romanticism such as P.B. Shelley and S.T. Coleridge, as well as early feminist essays by American John Neal. It supported William Wordsworth, parodied the Byron mania common in Europe, and angered John Keats, Leigh Hunt, and William Hazlitt by referring to their works as the Cockney School of Poetry. It published Neal's American Writers series, the first written history of American literature. Edgar Allan Poe satirized the magazine's obsessions in Loss of Breath, A Tale a la Blackwood, and How to Write a Blackwood Article. Charles Whibley contributed anonymously his musings without method for 25 years. T.S. Eliot has called the Blackwood's magazine the best sustained piece of literary journalism that I know of in recent times. Next one is The Indicator. It's a weekly literary periodical published by Joseph Appleyard from 1819 to 1821. It was edited by Hunt. Hunt wrote much of the content, which included reviews, essays, stories, and poems. Then comes The Guardian. It's a British daily newspaper and was founded in 1821 as the Manchester Guardian and changed its name in 1959. Along with its sister papers, The Observer and The Guardian Weekly, The Guardian is part of the Guardian Media Group owned by the Scott Trust. The trust was created in 1936 to secure the financial and editorial independence of The Guardian in perpetuity and to safeguard the journalistic freedom and liberal values of The Guardian free from commercial or political interference. The trust was converted into a limited company in 2008 with a constitution written so as to maintain The Guardian the same protections as were built into the structure of the Scott Trust by its creators. Its profits are reinvested in journalism rather than distributed to owners or shareholders. Next one is The Companion. It's a weekly literary periodical published by Hunt and Clark from January to July 1828. It was edited by Hunt. It discussed subjects such as books, theoretical productions, and miscellaneous topics. Next one is the Goddess Ladies Book. Known as Goddess Magazine and Ladies Book, it was an American women's magazine that was published in Philadelphia from 1830 to 1878. It was the most widely circulated magazine in the period before the Civil War. In the 1860s, Goddess considered itself the queen of monthlies. Goddess intended to take advantage of the popularity of gift books, many of which were marketed specifically to women. Each issue contained poetry, articles, and engravings created by prominent writers and other artists of the time. Sarah Joseph Hale, the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb, was its editor from 1837 until 1877 and only published original American manuscripts. Although the magazine was read and contained work by both men and women, Hale published 3 special issues that only included work done by women. When Hale started at Goddess, the magazine had a circulation of 10,000 subscribers. 2 years later, it jumped to 40,000. And by 1860, it had 150,000 subscribers. In 1845, Louis Goddess began copyrighting each issue of the magazine to prevent other magazine and newspaper editors from infringing their text. This move, a first in America, was criticized by editors at the Baltimore Saturday Visitor. They called it a narrowly selfish course and stated that Goddess would review it bitterly. Hale created a regular section with the heading Employment for Women beginning in 1852 to discuss women in the workforce. In general, Goddess disliked discussing political issues or controversial topics in his magazine. In the 1850s, he dismissed Sarah Jane Lippincott as assistant editor for denouncing slavery in the national era. Lippincott publicly denounced Goddess in response, and Goddess later recanted. Nevertheless, he forbade his journal from taking a position during the American Civil War. In fact, during the war, the magazine made no acknowledgement of it whatsoever, and readers looked elsewhere for war-related information. In the process, Goddess lost about 1/3 of its subscribers. Goddess sold the magazine in 1877 to John Hilsays Hollenbeek before his death in 1878. After further changes of ownership and a name change to Goddess magazine to reflect a broader content, it ceased publication in 1896. Edgar Allan Poe had one of his earliest short stories, The Visionary, printed in Goddess in 1834. He also published several other works in this magazine like A Tale of the Ragged Mountains, The Oblong Box, Thou Art the Man, and The Cask of Amontillado. Other contributors include Nathaniel Hawthorne, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Washington Irving, James Kirk Paulding, William Gilmore Simms, Nathaniel Parker Willis, and Francis Hodgson Burnett. Sarah Hale used her role to advocate the education of women. Some of her articles focused on writing techniques and offered reading lists similar to those offered to college students. She wrote about schools that accepted women as students and praised Vassar College, which opened in 1865, and personally assisted in funding it. She believed that women's education should be similar to that of men and advocated that more professions be open to women, including medicine. So guys, let us stop our today's session and now let us move on to the previous year question paper discussion. This is the 2017 year NET exam question paper. So I will read it out. Which English journal announced that it was principally intended for the use of politic persons who are so public-spirited as to neglect their own affairs, to look into transactions of state, but fail to live up to this and amuse readers with accounts of gallantry, pleasure, and entertainment? The options given are A. The Spectator, B. The Tattler, C. The Daily Current, D. The Review. Without any doubt, we can say the answer is option B, The Tattler. This one is taken from 2015 year question paper. I suffered from impaired eyesight, depression and poverty and left Oxford without a degree. After a period as a teacher and my marriage to a widow twice my age, I left for London to begin writing for a magazine. I produced my own journal. Choose the correct answer, identifying the writer, the magazine and the journal. 4 options are given below. You can go through it. So the right answer is option D. Samuel Johnson, The Gentleman's Magazine, The Rambler. This question paper is from the 2020 Shift 2 exam. So most of you will be familiar with this question. Arrange the following 19th century magazines in the chronological order of their publication. 4 magazines' names are given. The London Magazine, Quarterly Review, The Spectator, Edinburgh Review. Choose the correct answer from the options given below. These are the options. And the right answer is option 3. Edinburgh Review, Quarterly Review, the London Magazine, The Spectator. This question is taken from the 2020 Shift 1 question paper. Arrange the following 18th century magazines in the chronological order of publication. A. Critical Review, B. The Monthly Review, C. The Gentleman's Magazine, D. The Rambler. Choose the correct answer from the options given below. And the correct answer is option 4. The Gentleman's Magazine, The Monthly Review, The Rambler, The Critical Review. Next question is, what is the chronological order of the appearance of the following periodicals? 1. Tattler, 2. The Spectator, 3. The Examiner, 4. The Reflector. Choose the correct option, and the correct option is option 3. A, B, C, D. That is Tattler, Spectator, The Examiner, The Reflector. Now often did Richard Steele's Tattler appear every week, and how many issues of Tattler in total were published? This is the next question. And 4 options are given, and the correct answer is option 3. 3 times a week and 271 issues. Okay, so friends, let us wind up our today's video. Hope you understood it thoroughly, and yet another huge list of periodicals, magazines and journals is waiting for you. But we will be discussing it only in the next video. So till then, stay tuned guys.